Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel fear, but he who conquers that fear. In the early 1800s, foreign missionaries slowly began to disenfranchise Hawaiian culture, banning the Hawaiian language and making cultural practices like hula and chants frowned upon. This also included surf practices. This culture loss made many Hawaiians ashamed of their heritage. As tourism took over the islands nearing the turn of the 20th century, the Waikiki Swimming Club introduced surfing to many haoles that contributed to the arrival of the surf culture. Surfing began to grow dramatically. It swept the nation and became part of American pop culture. It wasn't long before the North Shore of Oahu became a popular surf spot. By the 1960s, there were many adept surfers, including the Hawaiian legend Eddie Aikau. Despite Eddie Aikau's tragic death as a young man, his legacy that he left on Hawaiian culture and on society will remain a triumph for generations to come. Eddie was a crucial factor in protecting Waimea. He played a key role in resolving the conflicts between Australian and Hawaiian surfers, and he encouraged the Polynesian Voyaging Society to sail the way of his ancestors for the Hawaiian Renaissance. Born May 4, 1946, on the island of Maui, he was second oldest of the 5 Aikau kids. Even at a young age, he seemed to rise up to the top. Eddie was a crucial factor in protecting Waimea Bay surfers. Never turn your back on the ocean. Without proper knowledge of its conditions, the ocean is very dangerous. The ocean is unpredictable. Raging currents, steep waves, no lifeguards to ensure safety. Casualties were inevitable. By 1967, Waimea was desperate for a lifeguard due to the number of deaths. The director of the water safety for the city and county of Honolulu needed someone who was skilled and committed and willing to work in the treacherous conditions of Waimea during the wintertime. Eddie was qualified and was hired regardless of not receiving his high school education. Eddie's brother, Clyde, worked with him part-time. During his time as a lifeguard, he successfully rescued more than 500 people, and nobody's lives were taken under the watch of Eddie Aikau. Eddie played a key role in resolving the conflicts between Australian and Hawaiian surfers. A number of pro surfers came to the North Shore during the winter seasons for competition and media. Nearing the 1950s, other countries like Europe were introduced to surfing. Wayne Bartholomew was a pro surfer from Australia. He wrote an article titled "Busting Down the Doors" for Surfer magazine. This boasted about how the new generation of Australian surfers dominated the North Shore. He wrote, "You not only have to come through the back door to get invitations to a pro meet, but you have to bust down the door before they hear you knocking." This angered many locals and eventually led to violence. Anger escalated and Bartholomew began receiving death threats, forcing him to move to a nearby resort. This was when Eddie knew things had gone too far. Eddie arranged a meeting that was called Ho'oponopono, or to make right, where respected families are open to an honest discussion. Bartholomew was banished off the North Shore for 3 years. Many believe this saved his life. Eddie encouraged the Polynesian Voyaging Society to sail the way of his ancestors for the Hawaiian Renaissance. In the early 70s, many Hawaiians became engaged in rediscovering their lost culture and heritage. The movement sparked the interest of nearly forgotten practices and traditional arts. The center of this revival was to bring back attention to the Hawaiian language. The Polynesian Voyaging Society had built a replica of an ancient Hawaiian canoe that was planned to sail to Tahiti. Eddie was enthusiastic about this rise of cultural awareness and was eager to participate in this project. This canoe was named Hokulea, meaning the Star of Gladness. Immediately, he fell in love with Hokulea, for it represented the awakening of Hawaii's great culture. Thousands of friends and family waved from the North Shore as the crew departs. The conditions were questionable, however, they continued to sail. The canoe started adding weight as water leaked into the sideboards, and within 5 to 10 minutes, the canoe started to flip. The crew huddled up in the freezing waters, and Eddie, who took initiative, told them he would sail out to find help. This was an emotional moment for the crew, but Eddie had a confident attitude. Eddie paddled away and searched for help. Less than an hour later, a C-130 plane flew over and picked up the crew members. The Coast Guard began their rescue operation to find Eddie. Eddie's disappearance was all over the news, and rescue operations continued. However, hope was lost and Eddie's father called off the search. No one knows what happened to Eddie Aikau, but the channel between Oahu and Molokai is one of the most dangerous and deadly channels in the world. Eddie's fate likely rests in this zone. Despite Eddie Aikau's tragic death as a young man, his legacy that he left on Hawaiian culture and on society will remain a triumph for generations to come. Eddie's spirit and legend lives on today. In remembrance of Eddie Aikau, the Aikau family holds a competition at Waimea Bay called the Eddy. The Eddy takes place when waves go above 20 feet consistently. 28 competitors are chosen to represent at Waimea Bay. Thousands crowd the beach just to catch a glimpse of these great surfers. About 1 million watched on the webcast. As waves grew above 25 feet, organizers were unsure if the waves were too dangerous. But Mark Fu turned to them and said, "Eddie would go." And the eddy continued on. This phrase, "Eddie would go," became a saying meaning to take risks if it means doing the right things. It's not just paddling into a big wave, it represents Eddie's sense of selflessness that saved many and inspired millions. Eddie was the first official lifeguard at Waimea Bay and saved hundreds. He helped to resolve the conflicts between Australian and Hawaiian surfers, and he encouraged Polynesian voyaging society to continue to sail the way of their ancestors. Eddie died tragically, however, the accomplishments he made during his lifetime inspired many and left an impact on Hawaii and the world. Overall, Eddie was triumphant, and he will be remembered for generations to come. Eddie represents the spirit of aloha. Today, he is still encouraging others to fulfill their dreams with the famous saying, "Eddie would go."